You're listening to Cards to the Moon, a podcast about trading cards from both a collector and investor perspective. We hope you'll stick around for the ride as we take a deep dive into the state of the hobby, share some hot takes, hopefully some useful advice, and fun stories along the way. Hey guys, welcome back to Cards to the Moon. This is episode 264, and my name is Clark from 5cardguys.com and 5cardguys on Instagram and on YouTube. With me co-hosting, as usual, is Hyung of Integrity Sports Cards and John, who is TradeView at Recess. All our links to our social media pages are in the show notes below. All right, off the top, guys. I admit right off the bat that I don't know much about wrestling cards. I actually did one interview in season 3 of the pod, if you guys remember, with Shane Norton, who was a wrestling card collector. So you could go back and listen to it from our website. But I learned a lot from him. But since that interview, I feel like wrestling in the hobby has only grown and has grown a lot. I don't know, Hyung, if you remember, but when we went to Fanatics Fest, the autograph sessions, the ones that sold out immediately were all the wrestling stars. And that kind of surprised me a bit, but now that I know how diehard the fans are doesn't surprise me as much. But more recently, Topps just announced a new long-term partnership with WWE, which means there's going to be on-card autograph cards of some of the top wrestlers right now, like Rhea Ripley, Cody Rhodes, and even Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson has cards coming back, I believe in 2025, the Topps Chrome set. So we really need Will on the show because he's the wrestling fan, the wrestling card collector, and I'll try to arrange a time with him for a special Friday pod to talk about his wrestling fandom. But for now, general thoughts on this partnership and what's your gut saying about WWE cards? Is this going to be a huge thing? Yeah. Or do you think, because the reason why I asked this question is there a possibility that this becomes like F1? You know what I mean? Where there's this initial hype, but and we think that it's going to take off because there's international fans for F1. We've talked about this in the pod, but then what ends up happening is that within the hobby, it just kind of fizzles out a little bit or dies down. So what do you think?
I think it's going to be a little different than F1. I know we were, at least I was bullish on F1, and I don't think it's a total flop at the end of the day because we don't know where F1 is going to be in the future and if there's going to be a huge surge. But the biggest difference I see is what WWE is doing in terms of the business side of things that kind of gives it, I guess, a bullish perspective, because for me, it's what has WWE done in the last even 20, 30 years to, combat MMA, UFC, and now they've actually partnered up with UFC in terms of the business side of things. But, there's 3 days ago, I think there was a big announcement, obviously at the beginning of the year, that Netflix signed a 10-year deal with them worth like $5 billion, right? And there's, on the business side of things, WWE has increased in revenue year after year, and they're in the billions too. So it's a 9-figure business at the end of the day. So, and they've done a really good job. It's like, if you were running WWE in the last 20 years, how would you compete with MMA? How would you get out of, especially the whole cycle where their main revenue was TV? So how do you keep it relevant? And I think that's what they've done a really good job from a business standpoint, is to pivot out of kind of like the old platform where we grew up to becoming relevant still, and still having a massive following, and it's increasing year after year. So when I see stuff like even the Netflix deal, how many more millions of people are going to have eyes on, WWE? And then you go back to the whole Topps thing with their, I guess, their overall macro lens goal of just collectibles in general. So, and Panini dropped the ball. Obviously, they've, for whatever reason, breached their contract that allowed WWE to get out of the contract a year early and sign with Topps. So I think the right marriage is there, to be honest. And I probably, truthfully, will never rip or collect WWE cards. I have zero interest in it. But I do believe that people love it. it's kind of similar to any other brand, such as, Pokemon, F1, whether it's lifestyle. I think there's a lot of bullish things that allow people to get excited for this, and I don't think it's going to be a flop because, like I said, I believe Topps had the contract for many years before this. So Panini, it was the last 2-3 years that Panini had the contract, and now that Topps has it back, I think there's a lot of bullish signs for WWE.
Valid points, yeah.
I think the only similarity to F1 will be the first couple of years. It'll be, you have that giant spike in the hype. But WWE, to me, is different because WWE can touch on so many different age segments because of nostalgia, right? Similar to Marvel.
Yes.
Like Marvel is immensely popular because of the nostalgia. Same with Disney, right? Like we all watched Hulk Hogan, Ultimate Warrior, Macho Man as kids. And then in the sort of Stone Cold The Rock era, I don't think there was not one male under 40 that did not watch WWE. Like at that point, right now WWE's back to being a little bit more on the niche side of things. But WWE back then, like in the Stone Cold era, like everybody watched that. So if you're, like there have been Hulk Hogan autos, and I think there was a Steve Austin auto, but this year the Rock auto is going to come out. Like that's gonna attract. Like the three of us may or may not buy packs. Like it's possible we could. We went from I'm not touching WWE to like, hey, I might be open to like ripping a hobby box to try and chase a Rock. So it's going to capture so many different age segments. So I think WWE and even moving forward, because it's with Topps, and Topps has now the capability of memorabilia and like the whole debut patch idea. Yeah. It's not just with baseball. There, you saw it in MLS soccer. You could see it in WWE. Right. You could see like patch autos of The Rock, and it could be.
Do you get like the underwear?
Yeah. I was gonna say.
Game used.
Authentic.
Game used spandex underwear. Yeah.
Authentic sweat mark from his sack.
So, hey, there's going to be someone that wants it.
But there's tons of possibilities now, right? Like before, I think the concern with F1 was like, okay, after there's not many rookies that come in year out. It's kind of the same faces every year, and Panini didn't really do much to innovate. Whereas on this side with WWE, they can continually capture, especially on the chase side. I think Topps is now quickly learning what they can do every year to re-up the chase, right? And even though the characters are the same with Marvel, there is something that they can touch on to get collectors excited about chasing, right? So I think
for sure,
I think it'll be different. I think especially with Topps at the helm again, and WWE is still super strong, like Hyung was saying, like the business and how much money it makes, it's monstrous. Crazy. So why wouldn't Topps want to really spend some of their R&D and all of that stuff and marketing into this? So I think WWE is going to be a little bit different.
Yeah, I think it's a no-brainer for Topps, and I have 3 main points to highlight why I think it's different than F1. First, you already said it, John. Nostalgia, huge factor that I don't think F1 had much of, versus wrestling and all the other major sports. 2, North American collectors versus international. We talked about international collectors possibly supporting F1, but we find out that's harder to do, right? And we're going to talk about it in the next segment, actually, being an international buyer and seller. It's different from being an American buyer and seller where things are right in your face, easier access and all that. But I think WWE caters more to a North American audience, which I think is a huge benefit. And 2, Fanatics / Topps being involved. Even at Fanatics Fest, they got the wrestlers coming and interacting with the crowd. You don't see that with F1 drivers. Right. We didn't see that at all. And I think Fanatics is going to double down on that. And like I just said earlier in this podcast, the autograph sessions, they're all fully booked before the show even started. Whereas other big time athletes, you could have got their autograph leading up to the first day of Fanatics Fest, and that goes to show you how diehard the fans are as well. It's crazy. Like, people are totally dressed up as their favorite wrestler, and yeah, you know what I mean? Like, it's insane. Just having experienced that myself at FanFest. So I think for those main three reasons, wrestling cards are just gonna continue to grow, and I'm excited to see what happens with it. Because on the surface, the reason why I phrased it that way, and the reason, and I knew that you guys would feel the same way, but on the surface, it looks similar, right? You got the Netflix special, you got this niche kind of sport. How will it translate into the hobby, and so that's an interesting discussion to be had, but I guess we'll see. But I'm pretty confident that wrestling will be a lot different than F1.
And I think Fanatics, what they're just recognizing is kind of like culture. Everything is selling culture at the end of the day, and how well they could get the culture to buy into collectibles. So maybe F1, they didn't do a good job with that. Whereas, you look at Marvel, you look at Pokemon, you look at all these, I know it's different, but like, why are these like brands successful at the end of the day? It's you're selling culture at the end of the day. And I think that's the most important thing. And that's what we're seeing in baseball too. And all these other sports is, at the end of the day, who are the collectors? It's the people that are diehard fans at the end of the day. So if you could merge that gap of, collectors, and I know we're talking in this next segment about like international, I think that is going to change too, the scope of landscape. So right now, yes, over the last 20 years, it's been dominated by the western part of the world. But like I said, where our world is going right now and how fast and rapidly technology is changing, I think those things where, I have shipping issues from Japan to Toronto, I think those things are going to change. So if those infrastructure things change, how does the whole scope of like the landscape look? So it'll be interesting, I think, because we've entered a new era where technology is rampantly increasing, and we don't know what's in play yet. So for me, it's an open canvas. And I think it'll be very interesting to see where Fanatics can take this new partnership.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's a perfect segue for our next segment, Hobby Headlines. So like Hyung was saying, big news especially for all of us international collectors, i.e. non-Americans. But PSA, the leading grading company, announced that for 2025, there are definitive plans to expand outside of the US with an expanded operation in Canada, moving their base from Halifax, which is the East Coast here, to Toronto, biggest city in Canada. In Europe, including a submission center in Germany and a larger facility in Tokyo. So in an interview in The Athletic with PSA President Ryan Hogue, he didn't give any firm timelines, but he did mention the Tokyo expansion would happen within the first 3 months of 2025. So to me, that sounds like a play to gain more of the TCG collectors to grade with PSA abroad. But before I get your thoughts, Hyung and John, if you're a listener from the States, which is the majority of you according to our data, before you tune out, why I think this is significant for the hobby overall is that with less barriers to grading internationally, I would think that would entice more collectors / investors to the hobby. And more people in the hobby means more people you can buy, sell, and trade from. So bottom line, everyone, I think, should be excited about this new development. What about you guys? Initial thoughts, and I'll go over some of the key points in the article that we can have more of a discussion on.
Yeah, no, I think it's inevitable. Like, we did have a PSA Canada. Brad Hartland ran that out in Halifax. So it was a matter of time before, the market was big enough. The demand was there where, we need a physical location. And eventually, hopefully, operations, because I still do believe that, the cards will still be shipped to California. So I would like to see PSA Canada be individual in terms of operations so that it follows the same standards as California, but it doesn't have to be shipped. I think these are the little things that, from a business standpoint, how can you service the customers better? And I think it's inevitable that, and to me, it's such a good bullish sign of just the sports card market. Like, to me, opening up in Tokyo, massive. Like, again, culture. If you could connect that Japanese culture with now PSA as a brand, and PSA becomes a huge popular brand in the East Coast, even in Korea, like I think all that's gonna change as well, where it is gonna be a global industry now, and that's their intention. Is they've had the proof of concept here in the West Coast, right? In West Coast, I mean North America. So you have the model to replicate. So it's all about, expansion and vertical growth, right? So to me, they're doing exactly what should have been done earlier, but I'm just glad that they're doing it, because it seems like they have a good idea of how now they could do it efficiently with a solid background of the business that's already established. So for me as a collector, I would love to go in and drop my cards off and not worry about anything else. Like, instead of me submitting myself, me having to track it, worry about it, and then it's all on me, especially if I'm submitting for like friends and stuff, right? Like, then you do 100 card submission that's worth like 20-30 grand, and you're like, kind of like, did PSA receive it or not? You hear all these horror stories that hopefully it doesn't happen to you, but those are the things that I think it gives peace of mind to people that there is something local. So to me, great news, especially in Canada. In Toronto, I believe it's going to be the hub, which makes total sense. There's a massive collectors, in Toronto, so it makes sense from a business standpoint, but even from a consumer standpoint, it's something that I look forward to, because it will make my process a lot easier.
Yeah, for sure.
I think we're a little biased because the Toronto News, it's in our wheelhouse, so it certainly benefits us living in Toronto, and for folks who are living in Germany or Tokyo, like, it's going to benefit them by far the most. So we can be a little biased, but I mean, it's a great sign of, your thoughts on the hobby and expansion and going forward. Well, how's the hobby look? I mean, if PSA is like investing into, locations, physical locations in many different cities, that's a great sign of where the hobby's heading. And I mean, I think everyone can organically sense where the hobby is going. Like, it's every card show, local big card shows that you attend, I would guess for most people would probably say, man, that show was was popping. Like, there's so many people there, and it seems to be the sentiment throughout all of North America. So I think it's a great sign. And for those that live in these particular cities, I mean, especially for big collectors, there's no better assurance, that I'm going to submit a $20,000 card. Now I can go direct. Like, that's, I don't know if this is true, but I could even see, in the past, people flying out to Jersey or wherever the submission center was just to hand submit like a big card rather than send it through PureLater or whatever, right? So spending $1,000 on a flight would be worth it for them. So yeah, it's great news for sure.
For sure. No, and to that last point, I don't know if anyone heard our first season 5 premiere episode where I had two of my friends from the original 5 card guys, and they said in that interview they considered flying me out to Golden to drop off the Juan Soto because they were really nervous, and but then we ended up just doing FedEx overnight, and thankfully it got there safely. But these are things that as international sellers we're worried about.
For sure.
That I think other collectors in the States don't really have to think about as much. Right. And I think Ryan Hogue speaks to that in this quote that I'll just read right now in The Athletic. He says, "It's going to be a bigger operation that's going to actually allow customers to submit cards directly there in Canada. We're going to have the technology behind it too. So they'll have a tailored mobile and a web experience with a unique shipping address so the customers don't have to navigate customs and deal with taxes and all of that."
Amazing.
End quote.
Huge.
Yeah.
Right? Huge.
And and you could see where this is going too, because if PSA is investing in vault services and selling direct with the marketplace and stuff like that, it solidifies that infrastructure of kind of like, hey, maybe you don't have to, it's more localized where they could do more deals more efficiently. It's cheaper if they have multiple locations worldwide, right? So they have a network of infrastructure within the world where they could now do what they need to do, like the PSA Vault, the marketplace, and whatever they're going to dabble into.
Yeah, for sure. And, whenever the Toronto office opens up, I mean, now I'll have more than 2 days to submit big cards. So usually I just wait for the expo, because for that reason, I just go to the PSA booth and I want to drop it off in person. Now, if there's an office where you could just directly submit it, that's amazing. But it makes business sense, kind of what you were alluding to, Hyung, earlier. It makes business sense for PSA to do this because a big reason why they're expanding operations in Canada is what Ryan Hoke says here, quote, "We have seen faster growth rates, 50% year-over-year growth from Canada, which is higher than the business overall is growing. And then the vast majority of card types that we're seeing from Canada, hockey far and away is the number one category that we see from that market. But there's interest in other sports and TCGs like Pokemon cards as well coming from that market," end quote.
It's all Roy.
So, Roy is propping up the TCG market for Canadians. But I mean, that goes to show the diversity of the type of card collectors we have. And obviously, hockey card collectors being number one in Canada is not a huge surprise. But I feel like we said this at the last expo, it just seems to be growing in other sports as well, and especially TCG for sure. All right, one conundrum, if you read the article, if you continue to read the article, is that the growth in the number of cards submitted to PSA could potentially mean higher grades for big cards, right? Particularly in vintage, just because of the volume. But the increase in pop counts could also decrease values of previously graded cards as supply increases. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think it would. That's why for people who've gotten in early, I think if you tackled the rare cards to begin with in the, I guess, pre-COVID era, I think it gives you even more assurance because they're not printing those anymore. You're not seeing those cards being graded. It's more the modern cards. So I feel like of course, pop counts are going to go up just in general, but I don't think in the right cards, at least the cards that you consider an investment, for instance, where it's not too modern like the Zion Williamsons and stuff like that. It's more kind of like the Otanis, the Lukas, the guys who are the next generation of stars. Those pop counts aren't going to change really because, what you see out there is what the population is, right? So for me, it's definitely something to be concerned about, and that's going to obviously increase as Topps and Fanatics are printing more as well. So there's going to be a lot more graded cards out there. But truly, as we see, it's like there's a lot of stuff that's not worth anything, right? That's out there. So I think that's not going to change. If anything, more is going to appear of that. And but the cards that are worth what they're worth will always sustain based on supply and demand. So I don't think the valued cards, the right valued cards, are necessarily going to increase. If anything, I could see a surge in demand because the fundamentals are there that keep that value where it is, right? So
you don't think there's going to be a Gretzky OPC PSA 10 anytime soon?
I don't think so. I think we had already seen it, right? We had already seen the mantles. We had already seen, and by luck, maybe somebody finds one in an attic that's absolutely, and yeah, you'll have one or two pop up because, people run into it. But in terms of production, I don't think anybody's holding out. I think people who would have had it already would have submitted it. And you're seeing that more and more. I see that on the forums. It's like, hey, I found this card in my attic and, it looks really good. And people are like, oh, it's fake. It's like, no, but right. There are stories there where they're legit. It's like, this guy just got into sports card after finding out the massive surge in sports cards, and he found an absolutely mint Jordan 86 Fleer that is just in his binder still. So I think you see that in general more and more. So I think that's not going to change. I think if anything, more and more of that will increase. But I don't think PSA is giving out 10s like they do, on modern cards. So it's definitely a pop pop control as well.
Yeah, I don't know if I have
I agree.
too many concerns about things like pop control and, like an office opens up in Germany, all these cards out of Germany will start, like pop counts out of Europe will start coming out like crazy. I don't think that's really a big concern, to be honest, because if Hyung was saying like supply and demand, if it's balanced, it should equal, right? So if there's more submissions happening as a result, that also probably means there's more interest kind of growing as well. So then the demand, it should match, right? The real issue is
Yeah.
if Topps and Panini start overprinting like the junk wax era, right? Like that's a bigger issue. So if they start overprinting everything like crazy, then you end up with a whole bunch of junk, right? But in terms of how it stands right now, I probably a good
Yeah.
thing. And to be honest, like a submission center in Europe, like that might help the F1 market because now because that grows like its own economy
Sure.
in that
Right.
area, right? Like now people can start trading slabs rather than being like, man, I sat on like 500 cards, I never submitted it because it's just so expensive to submit it, and it just doesn't, the ecosystem doesn't quite work out.
Yeah.
But now that it's there, it could actually grow certain, international, and then, obviously, I mean, I don't think Pokemon needs to grow any further in Tokyo, but yeah, but you guys know what I'm saying.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, that's a good segue because I want to talk about the European expansion. And the reason why they're talking about a submission center in Germany is because they've seen tremendous growth there in volume. So here's another quote from Ryan Hogue. Quote, but again, similar to Canada, I think there's just a lot of friction and concerns that you're having to ship overseas. Maybe you're not comfortable working through a partner network. You'd rather deal directly with PSA, end quote. So it's something we've already touched upon just right now. So my next question is, do you think the natural next step is to make buying and selling from international sellers and buyers and collectors safer? Because honestly, even for me right now, if I'm on eBay and I see that the buyer is from outside of North America,
Yeah, you're just like,
I'm kind of hesitant to
Yeah.
buy from, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
for sure.
I look for a North American seller first, and I'll pay a little bit more just for peace of mind, right?
Yeah.
So, and I believe the authenticity guarantee from eBay only applies to North America.
It's no.
or you might,
I think US. I've
US, right?
never
Yeah.
even dealt with that ever, which is crazy.
In Canada?
In Canada, yeah, I ship to the US all the time, and it bypasses the authenticity, which is crazy. Yeah, it's insane.
I should submit it to eBay's authenticity guarantee program, which is more peace of mind for me too as a seller. But anyway, the whole point is that the next step? Do you think, for international sellers, where one day we do go on eBay and we're like, oh, the guy's from Germany?
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
No, 100%. Because if you look at it just from a business perspective, and you're running the show, and you hear and you see all these problems that, like for instance, if it's Germany and they have issues with, purchasing and shipping, and there's all this cost, you as a leader of whatever industry, whether it's PSA, whether it's Fanatics, you want to tackle those problems, because if you solve those problems, the money is at the end of the rainbow, right? So this is what a good leader would do, is he would address the issues of why there's no growth in Europe, or there's little growth in Europe with huge potential. And then you audit it and you say, okay, these are the issues of why it's not moving the way it can move, right? And then you do whatever you have to do with your resources to solve that issue. And that's the beauty of it, is if you look at it just strictly from that point of view, then it's very transparent. If you look at it in kind of like, I'm in this thing and I don't like this, I don't like that, and this sucks and this sucks, you'll never see kind of like that bigger picture that we always talk about. So for me, it's inevitable. You have to, if you want to go to where they claim they want to go, you have to tackle on the issues that aren't allowing us to be there right now, which they're doing. So for me, it goes hand in
PSA's
hand.
been moving like Fanatics, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like every barrier to collecting hobby and making it smooth, they've been doing it, right? Like GameStop and recently Facebook, and the eBay vault, like the partnerships and all of that stuff, and then these submission centers, everything's just going to get smoother and smoother. I think the real question becomes like, why would you now at this point grade with anybody other than PSA? They're even going to destroy their own, own brand
Yes.
SGC. I could see that getting swallowed up. Beckett, there's like almost no hope at this point, even if a savior, I think the buyer did come in, but there's a PSA is just gonna. This is like the reveal of their future dominance. Like I don't think it's gonna make it so easy for collectors to use
Yeah.
PSA. There's just so much value add that why would you do it with anybody else at this point?
Yeah, and that's funny you mentioned that because I'm going to come back to that question about competition. But one thought before I forget, with just this whole kind of integration of grading internationally, vaulting, I think that's going to be a huge thing. Where if you think about it, if you grade with PSA internationally, if there's a submission center closer to you and you could do it more safely, then you could just have that card vaulted with PSA.
Absolutely.
And PSA is working with eBay as well.
Right.
So this whole thing about safety in terms of buying from international sellers, you're buying from a German seller, for example, but it's vaulted in the
Right.
US and you don't even ever have to take it out, but you have ownership.
Right.
Right. And we joke that NFT is a dirty word, but it's kind of like that, where you don't really physically have it in your hand, and you could get it shipped out to you if you want to hold it,
Right.
and you trust PSA to do that safely instead of a random dealer from abroad.
Right. 100%.
Right. So
Yeah.
it's just such a no-brainer in terms of making things safer, and that's how you increase the hobby in that sense. Where I'm sure there's a lot of potential collectors out there that get into it and they find out, oh wait, I got to ship overseas. How much does it cost?
Yeah.
Is it going to get there safely? Like all these questions which are prohibitive to anyone to really taking that deep dive into the hobby.
For sure. No, that's the infrastructure thing that we were talking about just earlier. It's like if you establish that infrastructure that allows a user in Germany or Japan to do that, like that's massive for the end consumer at the end of the day. And you're solving that issue that every collector has. Even we had, right? We struggle with that every day. And now if we have a local PSA, it now gives us different options that allow us to do whatever we want based on not on the problems, but based on what is available now. So for me, it's a win-win situation from a branding side of business growth in the hobby, and as well as a consumer perspective of us wanting to be more involved, but we can't because of logistical hurdles.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's great news for us Canadians that aren't regular hockey card collectors, because then we have a larger base to buy, sell from, especially if you're a baseball card or basketball card collector. I know you mentioned this, John, about, with this international hub or submission center, F1 potentially getting a little bump because, it's more of an international audience. But I don't know if that's going to happen, but I'm much more bullish on the soccer card market now, right? So do you think there's a play there where, especially, we do have soccer fans here in North America, but definitely not as many abroad. So do you think there's a play for soccer cards in the near future?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I think the big point or the turning point was Messi to MLS, right? It totally reminds me of Gretzky going to the LA Kings back in the day and just
Yeah.
igniting hockey in the States, right? So that alone put eyes on, like, I mean, soccer, people are into soccer regardless, but I think Messi is bringing soccer to the masses and interest in a little bit of a different way. Um, like MLS is pretty popular. I mean, it's not one of the big leagues in the world, but in North America, it's starting to be pretty popular. So I think, yeah, absolutely. If PSA, if sports card collecting in Europe starts to really take off like it did in North America, I mean, the sky's the limit for soccer. Soccer, like that could become easily the biggest
Yeah.
of the big sports. There's no question. Hmm.
Yeah. It's truly global. Yeah. Soccer is truly global. And that's what I mean. Like if PSA makes it easier for more soccer collectors to get into the hobby, we have more potential buyers and sellers for soccer cards in general, right? Even if you're here in North America.
And I think it goes back to Fanatics, because I think they're the marketing pushers as opposed to PSA, where PSA is the solution to be able to, execute logistically. So from a standpoint, like, think what they did, and we talked about this because we are in the front seat of, how Fanatics was marketing baseball here. Yeah. Right. And how that ties into sports cards. So they haven't done any of that with the European market in soccer. So if they have like a Ronaldo, or they have these big time names where now they're doing marketing, Fanatics is doing marketing and exclusive deals, but the infrastructure is not there to capitalize, they wouldn't do it. But if the infrastructure was there to capitalize, and now they take the blueprint of what they're doing from a marketing standpoint in baseball and basketball and other sports, and implement it in the European markets, that's going to be the driving force, is the marketing. And then PSA allows them to actually logistically do whatever is the monetization from that whole process, right? So for me, it's Fanatics. It's going to be up to them to be able to market, because they're the marketing geniuses. I don't think PSA is the marketing genius. PSA is more the logistical operations that allow them to monetize and capitalize. But it's on Fanatics at this point.
I agree. Just wondering if we should have held on to our Sunny National Landmarks card now.
I know.
And it's funny. I mentioned
you guys sold those? I didn't even know that.
I sold mine to a super collector. I did well on it, so yeah.
Nice.
You know what's funny, especially with John's reaction. I was talking to Roy because another story I'll share at another time. But I sold my Mike Trout as well. But then Roy helped me ship it out. And I said, yeah, it's kind of like the Sunny that I sold. I actually sold mine as well after Hyung sold. And Roy's like, wait, am I the only one with the Sunny card between our group? And then he checked the prices. I think it's gone down. But yeah, anyway.
I probably helped your comp, man, because I went way above comp, almost double comp on a buy it now.
Really?
So I
didn't do that well.
No, yeah. But that's what I'm saying. It was like the comps are so low. They're like 1,300 or something, and then I didn't want to put it on bids or anything because people would go off the last comp. So I listed for like 2,200 or something. Buy it now, and somebody just bought it just straight up.
Yeah,
snapped it up.
And then
that's like you helped me.
That was the comp that you used probably, because yours was probably next.
Yeah, I bought it for 17. I think I broke even. Like, I didn't lose.
Yeah, perfect.
I didn't win it. Yeah, there you go. Sorry, Roy. If he's looking to sell his.
He's like, damn it, you guys.
Anyway, all right, one more quote. And this is an analysis from the writer of the article. So it's not from Ryan Hogue, but it's from the reporter. He writes, quote, a more robust global network could also present the ability to facilitate easier buying and selling between PSA customers in different parts of the world. This is an industry that requires the frequent exchange of physical goods between a large number of people. The logistics of that can be an inhibitor to growth, especially globally. The potential to reduce that friction is meaningful. Right. So that's everything we've been saying, just in this segment alone. So my question is, and this is what I was talking about, John, returning to what you were saying about competition. What do you think this actually means for other grading companies? Like, what can they do to compete with PSA other than opening globally as well, which, might not be possible for, BGS because they don't have the cash flow. Do you know what I mean? Like, is there anything else they can do? Or are we saying PSA, yep, they just won. They're.
I don't think so. I think there's so much brand value in Beckett still. And I'm glad that somebody did take the initiative step to, purchase it, because I think there's massive opportunity. Because if you're looking at it as like a opportunity perspective, if PSA's and Fanatics and all these brands are growing the market, why would you not want to buy something already established with an amazing brand? And if the industry is growing, that's just more opportunity for Beckett, right? So to me, it's like Coke could never be Coke without Pepsi. And it's still the battle of, the push. And there's really nobody that's challenging PSA at this level. So I think Beckett would be the next kind of like a brand, because SGC is in-house too with PSA. So for me, it's a great opportunity for Beckett. You want to be Beckett at this time, because now you could have a blank canvas, because things are going to change. Like I said, you don't want to invest in an infrastructure that was outdated like 10 years ago and try to implement it. And I feel like that's what Beckett was doing, is they didn't have the infrastructure to grow. But if you have a fast forward mind of thinking of the possibilities, and I bring this up because it's more transparent actually to me, we don't know where this market's going to go because of technology. We don't know how grading is going to look because of technology. We don't know how global transactions are going to look because of technology. We don't know how crypto and NFTs are going to influence the collectibles space, because it fully hasn't developed. Right. So these are things that, people might say, oh, NFTs are a thing of, 4 years ago. No, it's like we're talking technology that has not been put into play, and we don't know how that's going to look, especially now in the times we're at. We've totally shifted paradigms. We've totally shifted the way the world operates, and we haven't seen it come to play in yet. We're starting to see that right now because AI is growing. We don't know how that's going to be implemented. So it's so tough to say that it's this way. I guarantee you PSA is scratching their head in terms of, well, in 3 years, we don't even know where we're going to be, because as technology increases, we don't know how that's going to be implemented in our future in terms of the global marketplace, right? So for me, it's a blank canvas that people are starting to draw on. Beckett's in a really, really good spot right now. That's why I always told you, it's like we should have bought Beckett if we could have fundraised the money, because there's so much opportunity in terms of, one, you don't have to restart. You wouldn't be able to restart a grading company from scratch. Like we've seen it. It's like, you're not going to move the needle. You would have to take a broken ship that has the fundamentals like brand value, history, nostalgia, all these things that are, I would say intangible assets, and now use those intangible assets now to grow based on kind of like the fundamentals and economics and technology of kind of like what society is presenting at the time, right? So,
no, that's well said.
Yeah, man, Hyung's too nice for me. I don't, I don't know if there's any truth, but I don't know if there's anything like. I think we all agree Beckett has brand value. There's no question, right? The name Beckett. They're still looked upon. If you look at a Beckett slab, you're still trusting the grade, right? That's why when people buy, True Gem 9.5s, they're really excited to try cross it over to PSA. The reason why, because Beckett's still really good at grading, and they trust them as graders, and they still have that brand value. Now, how are they going to stay afloat? And they did get bought out, right?
They got bought out, yeah.
So I don't know I don't know anything about the company that bought them out, but whoever that company is, it can't be just somebody's Joe Schmo. Like at this point, Beckett's going to need a real influx of monies to right this ship, right? Because you can't just Hyung is talking about, there's an angle of maybe AI technology and all that stuff that can overtake and maybe beat PSA. Yes, I agree with that. I think there is, but you're going to need some real capital on that.
You need capital, but I think Beckett is the brand that can fundraise. Like, it's an easy sell for any investor that has that kind of money to say, okay, where does the marketplace look like? Because right now the sports card marketplace is at about a $13 billion cap. By 2030, so even 5 to 7 years, they're projecting it to double. So from somebody who has the money, they see everything that Beckett has, and then they see the potential of the marketplace itself. And this is where the capital starts being no different than what Michael Rubin did, right? He's seen the sports card market, the opportunity, and what is he doing? He's trying to monopolize, not monopolize, but it's monopolizing it. But that's what the second person, like a brand like Beckett, would do, is now it's their job to fundraise, see the potential, now go head to head with PSA, whatever that looks like. So if they have to raise, $500 million now, I think it's doable for them based on what $500 million investment can be in the near future, right? So,
yeah.
I think one last thing. I think Beckett's saving grace right now is TCG. Like if I were them, I would be moving it all in on TCG over sports cards, because I think what keeps them alive is the prospect of getting Black Label. And Black Label generally in sports cards is incredibly difficult. But from what I've
Yeah.
seen, it's a lot more likely in like something like Pokemon. Like I've seen videos of guys like submitting thousands of cards attempting to get Black Labels because the odds of getting the Black Label is a lot better in TCG, and also the return on it on the investment is huge. It's still like I don't know what it is. Like Roy can answer, but 5x, 10x multiplier. So
Yeah.
I would think it's still alive and well. Like if you look at the Beckett submission numbers, I would think a lot of that is TCG over sports cards. I'm guessing. So, anyways, this is just
it's
a
funny
thought.
you meant. No, it's funny you mentioned that because one of my other hobby resolutions, which I shared on the last pod of the year, was to own a Black Label, and Will and Daryl were joking that like, oh, that's not that hard, but I don't want just any Black Label.
You don't want a
I
Kevin
something
Maitan.
Daryl, I'm not gonna buy it off you, okay? I'm saying it on the pod. I'm not gonna buy it off you, but to your point, John, like the one I was actually looking at is like this Pokemon. Roy will appreciate it. This Pikachu stamp box, and I looked at the Black Label. It's like $1,000, 1,100, and the pop count's about 300. So like to your point, I'm like, wow, 300 for a Black Label. That's high,
really
right?
high.
But I mean, if you compare that to sports cards, it's definitely high. But I guess, yeah, like we were saying, for Pokemon, it's easier to get. So I guess that makes it in a way more affordable too. So I wouldn't mind. I hate to pay for the grade of a card, but I do like the look of the Black Label. And again, to your point, Black Label is, probably Beckett's one saving grace. And yeah, what you're saying, Hyung, too, makes sense to me in terms of the technology. And I think that's why, although PSA just definitely has a super strong hold right now in the grading space, anything can change over time and rather quickly because of technology. And I think for smaller competitors like Beckett and even CGC to an extent, their major benefit is their agility. With a bigger company, you're slower to move.
Right.
And if you can move fast and go to where the next trend is and you can capitalize on that, that's how you start to grow almost exponentially if you can execute.
Right.
So I think, yes, you need capital, but I think you also need the right leadership in place too. Right. So I think both of those goes hand in hand to being a bona fide competitor with giants like PSA right now.
And then if you look back, and maybe this was strategic, but right before Beckett was purchased, the highest Ohtani auto to date, I believe, is the Black Label Orange Auto for $533, right? So to me, whether that was Beckett bought it, and then or someone
Just
from
give it a black. Give it a black.
Well, think about it. It's like that sold. It gave relevance to, wow, this is the highest Ohtani card sold. Not accusing anybody of anything. And then Beckett was purchased. So was that a intentional move, saying like Beckett is still relevant because now the highest Ohtani auto card was a Black Label, right? So, but there's that.
Are you saying that BGS should start marketing to high-end dealers? So, hey, grade with us, so you'll be really happy.
Well, an Ohtani auto is sold for $533,000, and that was like four times more than kind of like a PSA 10 version. So it is a massive sale for them, which like is interesting because the timing of everything was very interesting, and then Beckett was bought shortly after. So I don't know if it was a marketing stunt or but that's huge. It's huge to have a Black Label Ohtani auto sell for that much.
There you go. I think we can all agree on that. All right. Yeah. If you want to read the article, I'll put the link in our show notes below. It's in The Athletic. Great read. And just makes us international sellers and buyers and collectors really excited for what's in store, especially for this coming year. All right. Let's move on to our next segment. We call it Quiz Show. All right, we haven't done this in a while because we've been having so much fun with blind rankings. But this is just a straight up quiz show where I ask you guys 4 or 5 questions and then you answer them the best you can. All right. So the first 2 questions, the first 2 or 3 questions are based from the article. So the first one, as of January 5th this year, how many hockey cards have been graded by PSA all time? And I'll give you some multiple choice answers. About 500,000, A. B, over 1 million. C, over 2 million. D, over 3 million.
Wow. I don't know. John, you want to take a stab at this?
20 million cards graded.
What were
How
the
many
answers?
hockey
500? A
cards?
Yeah,
million?
I'm looking at the notes. 20 million cards graded in 2024. I would say 2/3 of that is probably PSA, right? So they graded, I don't know. What's the actual number? Like 15 million or something like that?
Okay.
Yep. I mean, I'm talking about PSA all
All
time.
time, yeah. So
for
even in
hockey
like
cards.
1 year.
All-time hockey.
I don't know.
But what percentage is hockey in that mix, right? Is it a 1%? Is it 5%? Is it 10%? Probably closer to like 1 to 5%, I would assume, because baseball, basketball becomes
Right. Most of the millions have grown in the last little while. Hockey base is not as popular. Like Young Guns aren't, printed as much as like a Prism base. But it's got to be in the millions. I'll say, I don't know though. Clark likes to be tricky. It's going to be either 500 or 3 million or something like that. Like 1 and 2. I was thinking about saying 1 and 2. I feel like Clark. Those are just thrown in there for the sake of throwing in there. Let's go with 3. Over 3.
Over
Yeah.
3 million? D?
over 3.
Okay.
I'm going to go with, what was B?
Over 1 million.
I'm going to say over 1 million. I think, yeah, I don't see it, not yet, but I think the potential's there. Yeah, for sure.
I love it. I love how you guys talk to yourself and,
Mind
rethink
through us.
yeah,
ourselves.
everything. The correct answer is C, over 2 million, actually.
So we're right between. It was good. Me and John, we talked
John
it
should have
out.
gone with his gut, but then he talked himself out of it. You got to go with your gut. There are more than 2.67 million hockey cards graded by PSA all time as of January 5th this year. A number, they say, that could rapidly grow by leaps and bounds as a result of the expansion of PSA into Canada, right? So, okay, number 2. Topps has their European operations in what country? A, Germany, B, the UK, C, France, or D, Andorra?
This is a trick question.
That is a trick question.
But I'm gonna say UK. I see a lot of like Topps release with UK, so I'm gonna say UK. Not yeah.
What was it? Germany, UK, France,
France,
Germany,
UK,
UK, France, Andorra.
Andorra. That's so random. But is that the answer?
Let me see the taxes here. Maybe it's like a tax shelter or something.
You don't have to search it up. It's the lowest tax rate in Europe.
There you go. Now I want to say Andorra. Final answer. Final answer, Andorra.
You're changing to Andorra? Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna go with France. No reason. I'm just like completely guessing.
All right. The correct answer is it's in Frankfurt, Germany.
Oh, interesting.
That was tough.
Oh man, I knew someone was going to do the research on Andorra. And
I
would
did.
get you that way.
I didn't know where Andorra was.
He took the
to be
bait.
honest.
Hyung took the bait.
I did take the bait. And how'd you know it was
All right.
the least taxed?
I just Googled it.
That's a journalist right there on the spot. Google.
All right. Question number 3. Actually, 3 you already answered, so we could skip 3. But I was going to ask you, out of the 20 million cards graded across the 4 major graders in 2024, PSA, SGC, CGC, and BGS, how many of the 20 million were graded by PSA? And I think, John, you mentioned it's 15
I just guessed
million
that.
cards.
Nice.
So that's... You would have got at least one right if that question was asked. So we'll go to the next one. Which sport accounted for the most cards graded last year out of the 20 million?
Wow.
Which sport accounted for the most cards graded last year?
Do we get multiple choice or no?
Baseball, basketball, football, hockey.
I gotta say baseball still.
Really? Otani? Oh yeah, Otani. Basketball.
But then Wemby had a lot.
And Wemby and Caitlin Clark. That's pretty big too, right?
It's either basketball or baseball.
I'm gonna go back. Football. Football's got a lot too, though.
Last year, we're just talking 2024.
Yeah.
Then I'm gonna say basketball. It's the Wemby effect.
Yeah, I'll go with basketball too.
The correct answer is baseball. 4.2 million.
Trust your gut, man. Trust your gut.
Trust your gut. This is how you play the game.
Trust your gut. That's what this segment should be called. Trust your gut.
Right.
All right, last question. Of the 20 million, once again, graded last year in 2024, how many of those cards were TCG cards? 2 million, 4 million, 6 million, 8 million.
2 million out of 20.
Yeah.
2. So that's a 10%. And then what was the other one?
2468.
2468. 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%. TCG.
This is 20 million cards graded over the 4 major graders, not just PSA.
Right. But it's a PSA still owns, I would say, the
15
majority,
million.
right? Yeah, 50.
8 is almost half.
Of the 20.
I feel like TCG is not, they've grown, but not that high. But they're up there. So I'm
gonna go.
I,
I'm gonna go 4.
my gut.
Sorry?
I'm going with my gut. It's gonna
I'm
be
4.
6.
4 and 6. The correct answer is 8 million.
Wow. That's a lot.
That's a lot of TCG, man. The TCG category accounted for 8 million of the 20 million total, while the top sport, baseball, accounted for 4.2 million.
Wow.
There's no way to win.
It's a bad quiz show for you guys. Bad start of the year, but that's okay. We got the rest of 2025 to improve. Go with your gut next time.
It's all about the
and
gut.
then you'll do fine. All right. Let's end off this show on a much brighter note with our regular weekly segment we call Pick One. All right, Hyung, you usually start things off. Do you want to do that for us today?
So just for the Blue Jays fans, they have to be happy with the off-season moves that the Blue Jays are making. So I'm and then unfortunately, and I've said this, Vladdy was give him a contract early, lock him in, but we didn't do that, and now Vladdy wants the world, which makes sense.
$450 million.
Yeah, you could have got him for way cheaper earlier, but I think Vladdy is so underrated still. I think he had such a big bump earlier on, and two of the guys that I think are kind of like the future of baseball with Juan Soto is Bobby Witt Jr. and Vladdy. So I wanna compare the two because I think there's still room to grow for both, just based on the output in their first. Bobby Witt's 3 seasons, averaging a 5 WAR. He had a 9.4 WAR last season, which is insane. Crazy. And I expect Bobby Witt Jr. to be that type of player, high WAR guy. A lot of home runs, a lot of stolen bases, a lot of runs, hit for average. So true 5-tool player, which you don't see. He's going to play pretty good defense that allows that WAR to be, always in that upper tier. And I'm looking forward to Bobby Witt Jr. potentially winning an MVP before Juan Soto, which is crazy. But I think Bobby Witt has potential. I think Vlad has potential. So I'm going to pair the two. 2 cards sold for $2,500 or just near that marker. Where would you spend your $2,500? Would you go with a 2020 Bowman Chrome, Bobby Witt Jr. Speckle Fractor, so out of $299, a PSA 10, sold recently for $2,500, just late December.
Auto or non-auto?
It's auto. These are both autos.
Okay.
So Bowman First Chromes. And I know you guys don't like speckles. So I paired that up with another parallel you don't like, a green. Vladdy Guerrero Jr. A BGS 9.5, which is a min gem, auto 10. 2016 Bowman Chrome, Vlad Jr. auto out of 99, a green refractor. Sold for $2,400, just under 24. So we're talking, just say $2,500 budget. I want to invest this year, not long term, this year of who I believe card has a better potential value. Is it the Vladdy green out of 99, or is it the Speckle Bobby Witt Jr. out of 299?
I could go first. Maybe this is a hometown bias. Probably is a hometown bias, but I'm gonna go with Vladdy. It's not Speckle. B, it's numbered to 99, right? Because it's a green. And See, I just think the news, if you were talking about short term, he's going to get that huge contract from some team. I don't know if it's the Jays. I hope it's the Jays, but things don't look good right now. But I think that news will bump up, his value, especially if he repeats what he did this past year, which, we're all hoping for. So those three reasons I'm going with Vladdy.
Nice. What about you, John?
Yeah, I think conventional wisdom. I gotta go with Vladdy because you've got like a you know pressed value in Vladdy, even though he had a great season, and I think there's just opportunity for especially. I mean, it's well documented what happens when you're in sort of like that contract building year that people all of a sudden magically play their best sport, so or their best baseball or best hockey or whatever you're talking about. So I think it just makes all the world in terms of sense. 1 year upside, it makes sense. Now, obviously, on the other side, man, Bobby Witt had a huge year. I think it's a bit of a high for him. And to be honest, if he continues that war path, um, it's going to be great. And I think that's where the value is going to lie for him. But it'll be tough to repeat. So I think I like Bobby Witt long term because I like this trajectory of him kind of, morphing into like the next Mookie Betts, like that type of player. So I like him long term. But if you're just talking 1 year upside, I think there's a play on Vladdy.
Nice. I'm going to go the opposite way, actually. I'm going to go with Bobby Witt. I believe that he has yet to. I mean, last year was a glimpse of his potential. I think first 2 years you give him kind of like that. So it's like that's the standard he's at. He's in the standard of Acuna, Soto, and I think Vlad can get there, but he's going to have to really hit. He's going to have to do what he did in 2021, or I forgot what year it was. The year he was runner up for MVP, and I'm bullish on Vlad. I think Toronto should have signed him. Like you're not going to get, that kind of bat from anyone. Like we expect everybody to be like Soto, Vlad. It's like these guys are generational talent. So for me, it's like Vladdy's a generational talent in terms of an 80 type hitter in the big leagues. Like you don't get, same with Bobby Witt. You don't get these type of players every year, but we expect them because we prospect them, right? So for me, Bobby Witt Jr. is kind of like, if you said who's the next Mike Trout, it might be Bobby Witt Jr.
Wow.
Like, obviously the power's not as big, but, in terms of production, in terms of longevity and, at least the next, 4 or 5 years. And you got to remember, Bobby Witt Jr. did this on a team last year where he was 23 years old, that KC wasn't supposed to be as good as they were.
Yeah.
And now they're adding the layers that they need to support Bobby Witt Jr. in that team. I really like the marriage where Bobby Witt is. And I don't think the team will, like how we always say, Colorado or the Sacramento Kings, like that makes like Kansas City not demanding. I think that stuff is gone now, where if you become a superstar, and we've seen it with Ohtani, at the end of the day, teams are going to pay. They're willing to pay massive amounts of money on these contracts. So it goes hand in hand. So I'm very bullish on Bobby Witt Jr. I think he's overpriced though right now still. I think Vladdy is the better buy in terms of that, but I think Bobby Witt Jr. justifies that inflated price. So I'm going to go Bobby Witt Jr. because it's a PSA 10. I think if he does what he's capable of, if he does it last year, I think that card's increasing, pretty decently. So I'm going to go Bobby Witt.
Makes sense.
Good one. Yeah, I love Bobby Witt long term as well. All right, John.
All right, boys, we got 2023 Crown Royale Kaboom Wemby, famous for having really bad quality issues. So a PSA 8, which is, if anybody collects that year's Kaboom, is considered a great grade.
No PSA 10s, right?
I don't believe so. I don't even know, maybe a PSA 9.
Couple PSA 9s.
Maybe, yeah. So the last one sold for 7,700 USD. I'm gonna pair that, and really, I'm just trying to pair it up with. I'm gonna pair it up with Michael, like a 90s insert Michael Jordan, and it could be any, but I chose one that was similar price. So it's a 92 Stadium Club Beam Team, PSA 10 that sold for 8K. But really, the crux of this question is the best of 90s insert, which is Jordan, versus the best of modern insert, which is probably at this point is the
Ooh,
Wemby
right.
Kaboom, right? So that's the real meat and potatoes of the question. But for the sake of visualization, we're going to make it the Kaboom PSA 8 Wemby, about the same price versus the MJ Beam Team PSA 10.
Do you know what the puck count is on the Dream Team?
I do not.
Oh man, you know I'm like I added. I don't know if you saw my Instagram story, but I added 2 things to my hobby resolutions in 2025.
Mhm.
One of them was trying to get an Otani auto. The other one was trying to get a Wemby auto. Like I am just all in on Wemby. You know, it's like when you remember when we initially talked about him a couple of years ago, or like he's an injury risk because of his body stature
Right.
and I think I saw one of his stats where like his numbers, career numbers, even right now is just ridiculous.
Right.
You know, what he's been able to do
Yeah.
in like less than 2 full seasons.
Right.
I'm like, wow, this guy's incredible. So I'm all in on Wemby. So I look at that card. I'm like, yeah, I kind of want it. I'm not even a big Kaboom guy, but I kind of want this Wemby card. but I don't know if I could turn down the Beam Team. Beam Team I grew up with. Again, it's probably nostalgia.
Right.
It's a Jordan card. You know, I don't have any Jordan cards. And PSA 10. So I think that gives it a slight edge over the Wemby because I feel like eventually there will be a few more higher graded PSA 8s. And I think that'll depress the value of the Wemby card. So I'm going with MJ.
That's a logical answer.
we know where Young's going.
For me, or that actually might be the emotional answer. Like in terms of nostalgia, the logical answer might be Wemby in terms of market logic, right? So for me, yeah, before I get flamed, because it's always the case when we go to, like, for instance, that Jackie Robinson one we did, people are like, are you insane? Like, why would you not pick the Jackie? But
Yeah.
I see the other side too. I see why modern cards are so valuable, and it goes hand in hand with what we believe pushes any marketplace, which is relevancy and marketing. So to me, Wemby is in the spotlight, and I know we laughed when I said, you know, the Spurs are going to be a playoff team. I still think that they can be, you know, sneak in, you know, by the season's end, you know, to make a playoff spot. And it's a testament to kind of like Wemby at the end of the day. So for
100%.
me, having the spotlight and him doing what he's doing on a daily basis, like, it's insane. Like, and he's still young, so he's going to be breaking records. I'm telling you, he's going to be breaking a lot of records. So for me, that Kaboom card becomes kind of like, where's this going to go? How stupid are people going to be to pay so much money for Wemby cards? I'm the one who's going to be selling it. So for me, it's Wemby. It's seriously, it's I don't think, especially the Kaboom brand, I think over the past years we've seen kind of like the liquidity and the demand for Kabooms, downtowns, all those, you know, inserts that we could say from a hobby logic perspective, it's like they're stupid, right? Overprinted or over demanded.
Right.
But the market doesn't care at the end of the day. So for me, if I'm looking at it at that perspective, which I have been, because I always say I want this for my PC, and then I end up selling it. I realize I want something else for my PC. So, and I don't think that trend is going to go in terms of when you find a card that you really want for your collection, you're going to pull the trigger. That Jordan isn't one of them. So for me, it becomes back to the hobby logic strategy of wherever the marketplace is I'm going to go with the Wemby. It's a short term. When the time's right, I would take my profits and go elsewhere. So Wemby it is.
All right, tiebreaker.
Yeah, this one's hard because I think the answer can flip flop depending on your strategy, right? So if none of these cards are in your PC, and it's more short term, then I think a lot of people probably, like, liquidity wise and stuff, will pick the Wemby. I'm gonna wear my, like, long term hat of the two, and obviously Wemby. I think at this point, like, long term, I think people are starting to see it, right? Outside of, like, injury risk, I mean, if he continues this path, he can just walk his way into, like, one of the all time greats. Like, that's how ridiculous his physical build and
Yeah.
height and blocking ability, all of that stuff is just unprecedented. So I could see the one set. So I think for me, short term, you got kind of that Kaboom hype and Wemby hype kind of mixed in all together, and it's just creating this like monstrous product. I think long term, if we're looking at the beginning of this pod talking about our long term out of forecast of where sports cards is heading, and more and more eyes are on it, more and more people getting into the hobby, you know pop counts, all of that stuff. And we're now getting into like MJ is, I feel like he's just one of those characters that are going to be timeless, right? Like he's just going to, throughout time, is just going to be popular. And I think you're really starting to see the boom of like 90s inserts. So there's no real answer. I think you can go both ways, but man, the tiebreaker is I feel like we have Cajun cardboard over our heads right now. If I have to choose anything other than the Beam Team, he's going to just be like, he's just gonna be rolling around, just shaking his fist. So I don't know. I feel like the safe answer is the Beam Team. Even long term, I just feel like it's such a safe card to be in. And volatility. You might think, oh, the Beam Team, volatility is, it's not as great, yada yada yada. But remember, Clark, you even showed me the graph on some of these Jordan inserts, selling for $4,000
Right.
one day, and then the next month it's selling for $12,000, right? So you just never know with these. With the
know.
Jordan insert market,
Yeah.
you never know. So I think the volatility, you'd be surprised at it. So Beam Team for me.
Nice. All right. Pop count for that Beam Team is 108.
108.
I just checked it up.
Yeah,
That's not bad. All right. I'll make this last one quick to end off the show. We'll do hockey. We'll cover all the sports today. Alexander Ovechkin, 2005 Upper Deck Young Guns rookie card PSA 10, sold for $5,500. And on the other side, the 2023-24 SP Authentic Future Watch of Connor Bedard PSA 10, also sold for about $5,500, $5,700 to be more exact. So you're paying the same price, $5,500. You're choosing the Future Watch Bedard PSA 10 or the Ovechkin Young Guns PSA 10.
Ooh. So sorry, say that again. It was the Future Watch Auto.
Yes.
So that
$9.99.
I'm pretty sure that went down a lot, right? Like from original
PSA 10.
From original hype, I guess, based on I guess Connor Bedard's output.
Mm-hmm. Sold for $8,600 last month. It went down to $5,700 in a matter of 1 month.
I'd like to see that like go lower, to be honest, because I think it's still overpriced, but it's I don't like the fact that like I'm not a big Young Guns PSA 10 Ovechkin. Like I'd rather have the SP Authentic Auto of someone that has the potential rather than a base. I'd rather have the SP Authentic Auto of Ovechkin, for instance. Like that would be some card that I would want, not the Young Guns PSA 10, because every time, even I had the McDavid, even a BGS 10, a PSA 10, it's just like, sell, right? When the time's right, because you're not necessarily married to that card. And I've had opportunities to buy like the Crosby Future Watch Auto, and then those are the ones you're kicking yourself in the ass. That why didn't I pull the trigger? But at $5,000, it's still overpriced in terms of that. But because it's a Future Watch Auto, and because there was the hype surrounding Bedard, it's just a matter of if Bedard is that player, can he perform? If he performs, I think you're going to do well with that Bedard card. But that's the question: will Bedard perform? Right? So that's. And then you have the Ovechkin chase with like, him
goal scoring
record. So you could see a bump with that. But $5,000 for a Young Guns is crazy. But what was the peak of a Young Guns, like the highest ever Young Guns? Who would that be? Like, would it be McDavid? No, I don't think even McDavid reached that high.
I feel like Ovi. I feel like
right?
Ovi's the highest.
Ovi
highest,
at
right?
the peak was over 8,000.
Wow.
And just last year, if you're comparing January 2024, Ovi's Young Guns was 3,300. So it's gone up.
So here's the way I see it. With Ovi Young Guns, you won't lose money, but I don't know how big the gain would be. With Bedard's Future Watch Auto, you could lose a lot of money, but you could also get a lot of money. So for me, we're at that point, and I know I'm not in the base game, and I'm not here to just make a small percentage. I'm going to go with the Future Watch Auto. I would rather take the risk of, Bedard being something rather than, sell it for $8,000 or $7,000,
Right.
just being safe.
Okay.
So
Bedard.
Yeah.
Johnny.
Like when we first started talking about Bedard, you guys remember, like I was like, I'm not quite convinced he's like on that kind of generational path. And he came out like killing it. And I was like, whoa, maybe he is convincing me. And I'm kind of back on, and it's not to say like, oh yeah, see, I was right. Not really that, but I just feel like I'm a little bit more convinced that Bedard is more on the A plus superstar level. Like we're talking McKinnon, you know, Austin Matthews. Well, maybe some people might be against Austin Matthews, but like in that territory, right? If you go looking old school, like Yzerman, Sakic, and not so much like the Gretzky, Ovechkin, McDavid sort of stratosphere. So I really believe Bedard is going to be more on the A plus trajectory than generational. So because of that, you really have to start comparing his future. Like his Future Watch Auto should now be compared to people like Nathan McKinnon. So where's that price at? What is it sitting at? 1,500 or I don't know what the price is sitting at, but I think long term, Hyung's right. I think this question right now, these are two cards that are propped up by hype for their own reasons. I'm not a fan of Young Guns either, to be honest. It's a pretty boring card. To spend $5,000 plus on a Young Guns card seems kind of crazy to me. But this really is a question of now, what's my money safest in? It's no question it's got to be Ovechkin because I think that the Bedard is going to come down further. Is there a time to buy it and get into it? 100%. Long term, I think there is a time to get into it. It's just not now. Like I think I could see the Future Watch coming down, down to $3,000, and then a handful of years later being even lower than that. So it's the OV for me. And I'm not talking long term. These two cards I would flip sometime immediately soon. So OV with the goal scoring record, it's an easy one.
Yeah, I get both your points. If I'm putting myself in this position for real life, I wouldn't be. And remember, I helped grade the Ovechkin Young Guns for my friend, and so he's pretty happy that it's at 5,500 right now, US. But I was never a fan of Young Guns. Like the kind of to your point, just the design and the look and it being a base card. I never really fully understood the appeal. And understanding everything you guys already mentioned about the Future Watch Auto of Bedard, that there's high volatility and risk at play. I honestly, I'd rather still have the Future Watch Auto. And it's gone down from 8,700 to 55. So I'm like, oh, okay. At least in my mind, I could justify it. At least I didn't pay 9,000 for it. So I might as well just. It would be easier for me to convince myself to buy the Future Watch Auto of Bedard. So that's what I'm going for. Bedard for me. So 2-1. But I thought it was an interesting 1v1 to start off the new year. All right. Thanks, guys. We appreciate you listening to our podcast. If you haven't subscribed or followed, we appreciate if you do. And if you give us 5 stars, that'll be great. We'll talk to you again next week for a brand new episode. Hey, thanks for listening to Cards to the Moon. We'd really appreciate you subscribing to our podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. And you can also connect with each of us on Instagram at 5cardguys, or you can follow Hyung at Integrity Sports Cards, or John at TradeU at Recess. You can also check us out at 5cardguys.com. Thanks again, and hope to connect soon.